Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. It's a pleasure to spend a little bit of time and uh, have a little chat with you all as you kick off the hackathon, which hackathons are some of my most favorite events. So I'm hoping that it will be a great time for you all. Before I start, I, I wanted to kind of mention that I welcome any questions you have. So if you have a question for me, feel free to ask it in the chat, and I'll be sure to leave time for questions as we go along. So I think, like many of you, you may be exhausted being on Zoom all day. So I just wanted to have more of like some supporting images, like behind this, and some talking points of what I'd like to cover today versus doing like a screen share the entire time. So welcome the interactivity, dialogue, and questions that you have. I wanted to kind of share one of my favorite quotes to start, which is from Ken J.R.R, which is creativity is to discover a question that has never been asked. And I found that question to be such a powerful one that has really springboarded my career and my journey. So what I'd like to cover with y'all is the power of curiosity. It sounds very simple at first, like, yeah, be curious and explore. Makes a lot of sense. And I really want to talk about like what power that could bring. And I'd love to share a little bit from my personal journey too, just in my career and where I've been, about the curious moments that have really made a big impact in my life. And then also explorations that we've made in product that really something that only was possible through being curious and through exploring. So a little bit about myself to start. So my name's David Hoang. I do quite a few things, but my primary focus is I'm the director of design at a company called Webflow. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of Webflow before. If you don't know Webflow, it's a visual development platform. Our mission is really to give everyone the power of code without having to learn to do it. So it's something that has been very close to my heart. I've been there for a year, and I lead the brand design team, the product design team, and the user research team. And I get to work pretty closely with product engineering and other leadership. When I'm not at Webflow, I do teach UXD part-time at General Assembly. Recently, I started my career as an angel investor. So just made a first investment in a startup I'm pretty excited about, and do some independent writing on this side. And I'm joining this Zoom from Santa Monica, which is just north of Los Angeles. I would like to tell you this is all planned in my career and where I've been, but it really isn't true. I was your age once many years ago, and really want to share a little bit about some of the journeys that what I planned and what I ended up doing as a part of this. So I think it's really hard for me to narrow in what I like to do. I think I'm a person that accurately so, very curious. I like to explore different paths. And I've always really taken a lot of pride in going against the grain and really building like my career and where I wanted to go based on my interests. So I really boiled it down to three of these areas: story, function, and form. Those are the things, regardless of anything I've done in my career, seem to find myself going back to that. So it's a combination of brand, technology, and design. And I think when you think about building anything, whether it's software or physical products, design is a process that's not perfectly linear. And I don't think life is either. So I think a lot of it is really about exploring different possibilities that you can take before having to commit to things. I think often there is a lot of pressure to figure out what you're going to do in your life, what you're going to do after you graduate. And I think it really is a journey that you can explore. So before I share some of my stories, I did want to talk a little bit about the power of curiosity and what it can do in your life and in your career. Has anyone read this book? It's called Range, and it's by this author named David Epstein. And he writes a little bit about how generalists can triumph in a world where you often are asked to specialize. I hope I don't ruin the book for you, but it's just in the intro. He talks about two particular use cases and upbringings. One, he uses the example of Tiger Woods, who's a golfer, very, very famous for golf. He had this childhood where his father really instilled that rigor of practicing golf, and that was all he did in his career. And then the other example he used is Roger Federer, who's a tennis player. And you would think Roger's life would be the same as like Tiger's, but it's quite the opposite. It wasn't until I believe Federer was a teenager that he started playing tennis. So he did music, he did art, he did other practices. It's a really good book, and I really recommend you reading it. The big takeaway from it is that, the experiences you have and what you explore all goes back and informs what makes you as a person, what makes you in your career. And that's the premise of that. And I think you'll hear a little bit about like where I plan to start, which is nowhere I am right now in that regard. So I do want to kind of debunk a myth about curiosity and exploration. I think for those who are into like engineering, building, it's the spirit of the hackathon, right? We always focus on efficiency. So it's to get a task done. And people often view curiosity and exploration as something inefficient. Like we don't have time for that. The reality, I believe, is that in that curiosity and exploration, it can unlock new opportunities for like where your company can go, where your product can go, or where your life can go. Curiosity also builds a lot of resilience too, because when you have a curious mindset, you seek out ambiguity and you seek out challenges. So the things that you have felt have been tough situations or more ambiguous areas now become opportunities for you to learn. And I like to share a concept which is called lateral thinking. So if you see the drawing on the left, the vertical mindset of an approach to solving a problem is going deep, right? Like dig deeper to solve the problem. In the context of lateral thinking, it's about digging somewhere else and being able to explore the opportunities, especially to find ones that you might not have been aware of. That's the power of curiosity. I'd love to talk to you about some moments in my life that really spawned curiosity. And I think there's a few that really stand out in my mind. So the first was when I was able to learn to code. And this was something that really unlocked something new that I would never have imagined in my life. So I went to school for art. So I studied drawing and painting. This was many, many years ago. And when I studied, I wanted to become an artist. I wanted to become an art teacher. Going into digital, going into engineering or technology wasn't even on my plan in life. And what happened was my junior year in college, I ended up taking a computer science class, and it was a intro to Flash. I don't even know if you all know what Flash is. It's so old at this moment, but like that was the first time I learned scripting. And it was something that kind of built that curiosity for me that like, hey, I can use code as a way to express. So what I ended up doing is taking a lot of the stuff I learned in that CS class in the intro to Flash and brought it back into the art studio and into the classroom. So I found myself doing more digital projects that were focused around ActionScript. And, from that, it developed this curiosity of like, what else can I do with code? as a way to create and as a way to explore. So it took me down this path that I did not even realize. So as I graduated college, and this is gonna tell you how old I am, is you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do after college. I took a gap year, took a year off because grad school was very expensive. And I decided to say, hey, I'm going to take a year off and find some work and figure it out. It was a lot of pressure for me because I felt like all my friends from school were going to grad school or they were kind of going into their career. And I had no idea what I was doing. So back in this time, I think you've heard of this device before. There was this device called the iPhone that came out. And because of my experience in art, like learning digital art and learning programming, albeit through ActionScript, you know, what was called iPhone OS at the time, now called iOS, was this new area that a lot of people didn't even know how to design for it. You know, if you look at the old images of iOS back in the day, you have this very skeuomorphic style of like really embossed buttons and textured leather. Of course, design now is a little bit flatter. You know, so there was an opportunity, like based on my curiosity, you know, I ended up starting freelancing as a result of that, because people who were developing apps back then needed a designer who could use Photoshop. Of course, people are all using Sketch and Figma now, but you know, in Photoshop, I was like, hey, this is a skill that I can apply. So I ended up freelancing and contracting in my early career, just focusing on that. So, you know, all the way throughout up until now, code has been something that is super important in how I approach, you know, my career as a designer. I will fully admit my code is terrible, and I'm not a software engineer, right? But I was able to then take this curiosity and be able to combine both design and engineering as a way to prototype ideas, as a way to hack. And that kind of became my specialty. So like I could now do this thing that, you know, though others can do it way better than me, it became this kind of niche skill by combining these two elements into one and offering that capability. So when I found myself like continuing to progress in my career, I followed that code path to continue developing that. So, you know, going from Flash over to Objective-C and Swift, and then, you know, obviously HTML and CSS, like that curiosity of taking that one class spun into this infinite possibility that I was not aware of. Again, if you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask it in the chat. But I did want to talk about the next part. But I think learning the code was like a really big breakthrough in my life. And growing up, I had no desire to program, terrible at math. You know, I find ways to leverage math as a way, you know, to just avoid it as much as possible. So it's just kind of like sheer will and curiosity that gave me this tenacity to even want to program and build and create. So that was one of the first curious moments in my life that really had an impact on me. The second is I moved to Europe. And you're wondering like, okay, what does moving to Europe have to do with any of this work? And I think it's really, you know, exploring new possibilities and new constraints. I think in perspectives, as I went through this, this is a photo of myself and my friend Adam. He's one of my best friends. We've known each other for more than 3 decades now, which is bizarre to think about. We were traveling in Portugal one day, and we said, hey, we should start a company. We should quit our jobs. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't want to do that. I just kind of made momentum there. It's a big risk. And we didn't know like where this would take us. So I in that moment, we started a company. So when we were in Europe, we started this company called Crosshatch, which is kind of this based on this drawing technique of kind of combining, two different parallel lines. And for us, it was really like, okay, I'm a designer, Adam's an engineer. How do we really kind of infuse these practices together to offer something unique to people? So we formed a product studio and a consultancy of 2 people. I did see one question, so I want to answer that. So the question is, could you tell an example of your digital art project in which you combine coding and art? Yeah, happy to share that. I wish I had images of it. So one I did is, I can't remember what I called it, but it was something along the lines of a social graph. So this, you have to remember, this is when Facebook was new and it was only available on college campuses. So what people were using at the time was MySpace. I don't know if you've heard of MySpace, but it's, but my sculpture project was this interactive sculpture around a social graph of how people perceive themselves on the internet. Because, when I was growing up in the internet age, like I call it the AOL days, where, things were behind screen names and like a lot of people weren't sharing things publicly. So my project was capturing portraits of people in reality and then building out these interactive websites that all connected around this graph of like who's connected with each other and how they present themselves on the internet. So the working thesis was around like, how people perceive themselves online and versus reality. So that's one example of how I took a project in a sculpture class that was traditionally around building things with plaster, bronze, and other materials, but then using code as a material to create that space. So then I even built out like a physical space to project these sites as a way for people to kind of walk in. And I know it sounds cheesy now, but it's really to like walk into the internet to see how people are perceived. Thanks for the question. But going back to starting a company, again, like I never had an entrepreneurial spirit. I think, as a kid, my journey was really like, I just want to make art all day. I never knew I would get into digital apps and start building things. And, to be completely honest with you all, Adam and I had no idea how to start a company. We just kind of dove into it and explored to do it. And, we both left pretty decent paying jobs for us to be able to take that risk. But I think there was this curiosity from us that just really wanted to focus on like, what could we do together? Because it was a dream of ours to work together. So, we spent 5 great years. We got to work with companies like Nordstrom and built their first iPad app internally. And, that was an opportunity that we never thought we would see the light of day for, 2 kids from a small town, that didn't even know that was possible. And, we ended up continued to build up the company to about 6 people. Not a big company, but it was something we took a lot of pride in, where we got to control what we worked on. We decided like when we could take breaks. And all of this kind of came from a trip when we were in Europe, just having fun and exploring. As we had our laptops, we realized, what, we could do this stuff remote. And this was 2010. So, very long time ago, before, before Slack and other remote tools that you have. We were using IRC and like other channels to be able to run a remote company. And like through this curiosity, it really changed our lives in that way. So then, we took another attempt, and I would say another thing where curiosity really changed the projection of where I was going, the trajectory in my life, is we ended up building our own app. I would love to tell you we made so much money from this and there were so many downloads, but we worked on it for a year, got it out there, and it didn't really go anywhere. I think I don't see things as failures. I see things as learnings. And the learning from this is, it's really hard to take ideas and make it come into reality, right? Which I think is the spirit of a hackathon. It's like, how do you will your way into this to become real? So I'll tell you a little bit about the product idea. So it was an app called Cargram, and even to this day, Instagram does not have an iPad app. So I think this was the third version of the iPad that we had. So, and we were like, hey, business was going great with Crosshatch. We had some free time. Like, why don't we go for it and try and make a product? Because we've done products for other people and other clients, but the one client we haven't worked with was ourselves. So we decided to make a prototype and actually build this out. And we did ship it to the App Store, and it got featured a few times. And I'll tell you, it's consumer apps are really hard. It's hard to get people get mad. We got so many complaints where like people got mad that, like we offered it for free and they're like, this is too expensive. Like it took too much of my time. So it is a brutal industry out there in app development. But I think that was the thing that we really learned from it, is that in order for us to get ideas out, we got to do it fast and we got to be comfortable failing. Because I think, my younger self really felt like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to make a lot of money and we're going to just make apps all day for the rest of our careers. And this type of work is super hard. So what I would have done differently is probably, take a more lean approach and really bootstrap it a bit more. I think we were really obsessed with, doing it as an iPad app and doing it as, building it natively because we were able to do it, but it takes a lot of time. And, we really could have started with the website or something else to do that. But I think, this curious moment was something that it's a lesson I'll always take because, getting your ideas out there and bringing it to life is very hard. And it's tough too, right? It was a lot of humble pie that we ate to realize that, we had this thing that was so great and no one really used it, and I still think of it as, such an impactful thing in my career, despite it having not a lot of downloads and not a lot of payments. But you know what? We took this idea and we sought it all the way through. The final curious moment and kind of the advice I would give everyone too is explore a lot of different roles. I have a list of all the different job titles I've had in my career. And I'll tell you a moment that really stood out to me is, I know when I did kind of find this sort of path in product development and working internally in product, I did take a pivot working in marketing. And I thought it was going to be a career killer for me. I was like, oh no, like I'm working in marketing now. How am I ever going to get back into product and really do that? And you know what? Like at the time, I was really regretting like the role I took. And, now at Webflow, I get to lead the brand design team that works very closely with marketing. And I would say a lot of that attributed to my previous experience working in marketing. So like that was another learning from my life and my career that like, you can always go back to something or you can always not return to something too. I did email marketing and I will never go back to that. And I know that about myself, but the thing is now I can work with other teams that do lifecycle marketing and I understand where they're coming from because I've done that role. So I think the more roles you can take on it makes you a more holistic thinker in that regard. And it was a lesson for me. I remember like so many years ago, I was just like, I thought it was going to be a career killer for me. And it turned out to be the best thing for my career. So, in those curious moments, I think, one of my best friends has the best advice I've ever heard. He's like, you can always do something for a year and find out if you like it or not. Because in the grand scheme of things, likely a year in your life is not going to be, that's a very tiny speck in where you go in your career. I do want to talk about like where product explorations kind of helped in using curiosity, but I'd be curious if there's any questions around the other parts I talked about, whether it's kind of career, deciding on that, or just even like building apps, especially as a non-engineer.
I think we have an earlier question that someone asked, what is a product engineer?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks for catching that. So product engineer is, this is something you hear at companies referred to as product engineering, which is engineers who build certain features for like this app or product that you work on. So for example, you have a product engineer at Webflow. They might work on the layout system in like how you build out websites. You might work at Instagram and you might be a product engineer on like the profile area. So it's like engineers that are working on features that are really customer facing. There's other types of engineers, like there are many types of designers too, where like, you might be an engineer that's working on ML, or you might be working on infrastructure to, or data engineering too. So when you hear the term product engineer, it's more or less like engineers who work on like customer facing features that they end up using, and works closely with product management design. So it's kind of that whole group is like product engineering. Any other questions? Feel free to enter in the chat, or you can unmute and ask too. Totally open. On my phone. No, I'm using this this app called and it's basically like a Zoom camera plugin. All right. Cool. Talk a little bit about exploration in products. So, I think when people ask me about how do I choose my career, I say I want to think about the story that I want to tell. And this photo always comes up. And, this was my time when I was at One Medical. And it's a healthcare startup that's kind of focused on general and primary care. And I was there for 4 years, and I was the first head of product design there. They have since grown tremendously. And when I was there, we were trying to figure out new opportunities and new like features we could grow. So I think, there was this area of work that one of our clinicians was really advocating for. And at the time when I was working with this team at the company, we had other priorities that we needed to work on. And I just heard so much from both customers and doctors to say, if we had this feature, like we could really explore something. And I think it could unlock a lot of things. So, I'm a person that likes to just try it out, and just again through this curiosity was like, what, why don't we grab a group of people, a couple engineers, designer, and our clinician, and let's figure out how to hack this, right? Like we're not going to send this out in production, but we wanted to hack this and really understand like what it is. So I'll tell a little bit about the opportunity that we're working on. Is like we found that a lot of, there was not a lot of engagement between a patient and a doctor between the office visits. So you might go to a checkup or physical, and doctor gives you all these things to do, and they never hear back from you. So we're like, okay, how do we make it more engaging in a way that we can kind of follow up and see what we do? So that was something we didn't offer at the time, right? At the time, it was really around booking an appointment and being able to do a video appointment. So the group of us got together, we started prototyping and building out different things of how it could look like. And we created these sort of screens, and in that room together after work, we're just like, let's do a hackathon basically with our group. So we put together a proof of concept, and we used a framework that Apple had called CareKit to be able to build it out. And this was something just through this curiosity and through this conversation of a lot of colleagues together, we decided we want to go explore that and wanted to go after it. The short story is, we did a hackathon around that. We pitched it and shared it to get feedback. Ultimately it got prioritized, and it's a feature that we have now, even since my time that I left. People are still continuing to build upon it. And I think that's the power of like taking this curious moment and exploring to say like, hey, we're just going to try it, and we don't care if we fail. And, and that's in the spirit of learning. And, I think that was one of the examples I'll always remember in my career where you can go against the grain and figure out and explore that. Another area we focused on too is like really trying to figure out like, how do we use different technologies to like imagine a more reduced office. So this was a concept around like, how do you like have sort of a self-check-in, because when you go into the doctor's office, like there's someone checking you in. So we're like, can we use this in a more reduced space, or can we had no idea, like, with COVID, this would be something very relevant too, right? Like touchless check-in, something like that. So it's just kind of like this continued research and development that we would do as a team to really explore that. So, this one didn't pan out yet. I don't know. We'll see in the future. But the other one with that, what I like to call that proactive care platform, like, that was through like constant iteration and constant building from these sort of powerful curiosity moments that really helped like springboard this moment of curiosity into action. Okay, any questions on that? Oh, there's a question. How do you market a product app in a competitive space? Oh, good. That's hard. I think for me, my advice is you want to find a niche market, right? Or you really want to solve something for a specific group. So, for example, you always hear people. I remember when I was had my company with my friend Adam, we would always hear people say like, we want to build a social networking app that's going to beat Facebook. We're like, okay, that's great. Like, good luck with that, right? And I think it's really trying to find like that area that could really serve a certain audience. There might, maybe there's a Facebook for, your family, and you can really hone in on that. Or, there's different ways to kind of look at the market and find like what market's not being served for you to be able to be, competitive in that. And I think, again, to the question, it's like, how do you market a product is, I think, really, the truth is that the product has to provide value, for people to be able to adopt it and use it. And I think that's your ultimate marketing is, I've been very fortunate to work at places where we have amazing customers, both at Webflow and One Medical, where like, for many years, they didn't have to do marketing because there was such a love for the product and the experience that, that would help grow in itself. I hope that answered the question. I know, I guess all that to be said is it's very hard to do. Okay, there's a question. What was your favorite part about working at One Medical? Oh my goodness. I mean, it's cliche, but it's true. It's the people. Like there were so many smart people and really caring there. I think the thing I really liked about it too is that it's a technology company, but it's also like a service company too. So we really got to work with doctors and feel like we solved really big problems. Actually, one of our interns was from Duke too during my time. So I think, but yeah, I think what I really loved is the impact of it. It solved a real problem. So I think as designers, as developers, we want to work on the coolest things and really kind of focus on that. And you might think there's something that you're doing that isn't as fun or mundane, right? I remember there was one project, I can't say like what the feature is specifically, but I think, it was basically something to improve an efficiency for a doctor's workflow. And I was like, okay, this is a really boring project for a designer or engineer. It took like a week. When we shipped it, we heard so much feedback from the clinical team that's like, this just improved my workflow. Like so much. I can't thank you enough for that. And to be able to hear that from like both, customers and clinicians in that way, it just really like was that realization for me of like how much of an impact being able to build things can be. You can really transform industries, right? It's not only disruption, but it's transformation too. It's like you can take something like this gift that you have and really make like a stark improvement on someone's life. Okay, there's another question. So I'm just going to read it real quick. Not exactly related to your product, but since you worked in healthcare related app, I wanted to ask you, why is it that tech sector has not delivered a satisfactory EMR EHR solution? I'm laughing because it's like it's a very hard question, right? I haven't come across a single healthcare professional likes using any of them, and it seems like within the research, yeah, such a good question. Where to begin? When I think being a designer or an engineer, you have to kind of think about root cause. You have to think about like system design. So like I always say system design before design systems. I think the challenge is, and I'm kind of speaking for myself now, is you have a lot of solutions that have been so dominated by the market that it's become this thing that has almost been a monopoly. So it's hard to adopt. And then you have this sort of software where like, it's the status quo to be able to adopt. You see this a lot in government too, right? And the type of software that's being used. And it's really hard to innovate in that space because of that red tape. So I think, that's the best way I can answer the question. It's just kind of like, I think that's why you see it hard to really, really move the needle on that. So I think, when I was working, One Medical was one of many health tech startups really trying to focus on, really breaking that paradigm and really like building new things and innovations in that regard. But I do think like, systemic decisions is a big thing about like how you can really change things. And I think that's why it's so important for, like people like in this group to really think about, as you're going on and building and creating things, like what are things you can kind of move the needle on. It's a lot of work to be able to untangle and unravel a lot of that, because you build a nice app, it still has to play within the system, the ecosystem that you're working with. So it takes a lot of time. That's a really good question. That's a tough question though. Okay, happy to answer questions, but I did want to just kind of share some final thoughts with you in terms of curiosities that, like, I think it takes you places you never expect you to go in your career. I think, I used to be a person where I felt like I had this like 15, 20-year plan of what I was exactly going to do, and none of it panned out. And honestly, I felt like it was for the better, because I really love what I'm doing now. I never thought I would like be investing in startups and like, really working in this type of way. But because of all these serendipitous moments that you may not realize at the time, like, follow that curiosity and like see where it takes you. And I think it builds a lot of resilience too. I think, I don't think it needs to be said even more in this year how much like resilience is important. And I'm not going to tell you that curiosity is going to solve all of that, but I do think it can be a counterbalance to the things that can be like challenging in your life or at work, to be able to explore like, what that looks like. Yeah, your career is a journey. It's not it's a journey, not a sprint. I'm sorry, it says marathon, but I meant sprint. Take the time to really explore. This is a quote I really love. I always start with the first quote and always end with this one, and I think that's so true about whatever you work on, right? So this is from the author of the book, the children's book, The Little Prince, and he says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks to work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And I think that resonates so much with how I think about my life and my career, is that, I've been doing this for 16, 17 years, and I feel like I'm just getting started in a lot of ways. And I'm just so excited, where that path takes me. And yeah, but I think, let curiosity be that fuel to inspire you to explore paths that you have never imagined in that regard. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to some of these moments that I shared. I hope some of these thoughts resonate. I'm happy to answer any questions you have around, career, tech, anything that might be helpful. But I'm really excited for everyone's journey in that hackathon. I think it's a great time to let go of some of the gravity in life and be able to kind of build and explore. And I'm so excited for y'all.
Great.